It's not surprising to me that our colleagues across the aisle are not in favor of a balanced budget amendment. It would obviously stop them from spending money on their top priorities, but which we've learned this year, things like transgender surgeries.
Democrats stood up and painted this reconciliation bill like it's some villain in a superhero movie. Devastating cuts, wealth transfer, stripping food from families. The music swells, the camera zooms in, and suddenly Republicans are cast as cartoon villains twirling mustaches over Medicaid and SNAP. But here's the plot twist they really don't want you thinking about. We're over $30 trillion in debt. Deficits are exploding, and somehow asking where the money is going is now considered cruel. Listen closely to the language. Largest transfer of wealth in history. That's the headline they want. But in the same breath, they defend piling another $4 trillion onto the national debt. So which transfer are we talking about? Because borrowing trillions your kids will have to repay sounds like a transfer too. Just not the kind that fits on a protest sign. They say Republicans are targeting the poor. Republicans say they're targeting waste, fraud, abuse, and a federal government that spends like it discovered a cheat code. Democrats frame discipline as destruction. Republicans frame it as survival. And somewhere in the middle of all that dramatic finger-pointing is one very uncomfortable question. How long can you spend money you don't have before reality sends the bill? If you're tired of the scare tactics and the theatrical outrage, hit like, subscribe, and buckle up. Let's watch the full clip before I give you the full breakdown.
This reconciliation package proposes devastating cuts to Medicaid and SNAP. My Republican colleagues will tell you that they are just going after waste, fraud, and abuse, but let's be clear. The only way to slash this much safety net spending is by making it harder for people to survive.
For decades, the administrative state has been weaponized against the American people. We can give example after example of flagrant abuses of American taxpayer dollars. Our own federal government is using taxpayer dollars to promote ideologies that tens of millions of Americans find utterly repulsive.
Let's call it what it is. It is the largest transfer of wealth from the poor to the rich in U.S. history. And for what? So that your billionaire friends can get nearly $300,000 in tax cuts?
This reconciliation bill, I believe, will balance. It will extend the Trump tax cuts for the working class so that they don't experience the biggest tax increase in American history, and it'll grow the economy. But of course, it will also help us to implement the Trump agenda, which is to clean up the chaos and destruction that Joe Biden unleashed on our country over the past 4 years.
The problem of ballooning deficits returns whenever Republicans enjoy complete control of the political branches. This is one of the great ironies of our political rhetoric. When they are in control, the budget deficits soar, and it's the Democrats who always bring the deficits down.
It's not surprising to me that our colleagues across the aisle are not in favor of a balanced budget amendment. It would obviously stop them from spending money on their top priorities, which we've learned this year, things like transgender surgeries for foreigners, DEI scholarships in foreign countries, left-wing media outlets like NPR and PBS. Would stop them from funding the NGO industrial complex that's facilitated mass migration into our country.
This year, they passed the obscenely ugly profligate law, which will add a jaw-dropping $4 trillion to the national debt because of its giveaways for corporations with political insider influence and billionaires, at the same time that they're stripping health insurance and food assistance from tens of millions of Americans to offset just a small part of the enormous cost of the tax breaks that they cut for wealthy elites.
And all of the various other wasteful government programs that we've been fighting to slash over the past year since I've been in Congress, at least. Those are precisely the types of programs that I would like to see cut, and why, amongst other reasons, I think that a balanced budget would in fact be prudent. every dollar that we spend right now above what we take in revenue is money that our children and grandchildren are going to have to pay back. And I, for one, don't want to, and I don't think that it is in any way moral to saddle my children, my son or my daughter, with debt to finance ridiculous programs.
All right.
As we have
Now that
been.
you've heard the whole thing, let's get serious. The Republican position here is not radical, it's rational. You cannot run trillion-dollar deficits forever and pretend you're protecting the vulnerable. Every dollar borrowed is a dollar our children have to pay back with interest. That's not compassion. That's generational theft dressed up as empathy. Democrats love the phrase largest transfer of wealth in history. But what's the real transfer? It's the transfer of debt to people who aren't even old enough to vote yet. They cry about billionaires getting tax cuts, but stay strangely quiet about bloated agencies, ideological pet projects, and taxpayer dollars funding nonsense programs overseas while Americans are drowning in inflation. Suddenly fiscal responsibility is cruelty? Since when did balancing a budget become extremism? And let's talk about this balanced budget amendment panic. If your priorities can't survive a requirement to actually pay for them, maybe the problem isn't the amendment, it's the spending addiction. Republicans are saying something painfully simple. Stop writing checks the country can't cash. That's not heartless. That's adulthood. The Democrat argument leans entirely on fear. Cuts to Medicaid. Cuts to SNAP. But they conveniently ignore the fact that unchecked spending fuels inflation, weakens the dollar, and makes groceries, rent, and gas more expensive for the exact people they claim to defend. Inflation is the most regressive tax of all, and it hits the poor first and hardest. Extending tax relief for working families and cleaning up government waste isn't a giveaway to the rich. It's a rejection of Washington's addiction to spending other people's money. Republicans are pushing growth, accountability, and long-term stability. Democrats are pushing more spending, more debt, and more lectures. At the end of the day, this isn't about cruelty versus compassion. It's about discipline versus denial. One side is trying to stop the bleeding. The other side keeps asking for a bigger bandage while opening another credit line. And that's why the Republican argument here doesn't just win emotionally, it wins mathematically.